From the Citizens Bank studio, welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show, where we celebrate every single day so many amazing people from across the state of Mississippi who are working in the trenches to make this a better place to live, work, and play. We've had a string of incredible shows. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining us and interacting with the show. We like to be there wherever, whenever you want to engage with us. So obviously the radio's king. SuperTalk Mississippi Radio is a big deal. It's the king, but then, of course, you've got social media, YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast. People are watching the show on SuperTalk TV from across the state. So, SuperTalk's a dynamic company, as I've said so many times before. But the opportunity to share incredible stories, to address an issue from time to time. We don't typically get involved in issues, but when we do, we try to focus on it in a positive way. And, it's great. So the numbers continue to be really good. I was looking at some of the engagement numbers more recently on Facebook specifically, and the numbers were really, really strong. People are very engaged. And, I think it happens to be episodic. And in this particular case is about, labeling seafood, local Gulf fresh seafood properly, and people are engaged in that conversation. So, listen, we had the opportunity as well last week to have Ashley Edwards on, the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, and he's an entrepreneur. One of the unique things about what he does in his work today is that he does a lot of he works with cities and states in multiple states across the Gulf South. But one of the things they do is they actually work in disaster areas after a tornado, or especially after a hurricane. And they've really, because he used to work with Governor Barber, he worked with Phil Bryant. He's working with a team today, and they specialize in helping local communities kind of recover after a storm. How to find the money, where these relationships need to be. We tend to see a lot of turnover in local areas. That's what happens. The local elected officials come in, they bring their team in, so you don't build a lot of intellectual capacity around storm recovery efforts and so on. So we had a great conversation about that. But the other thing we talked about was this very, very active hurricane season that all prognosticators, all the scientists who specialize in tropical weather say the conditions for this year are unlike anything they've ever seen before, especially when you look at the heat content of the main development region of the Atlantic, and then, of course, the Gulf of Mexico. Hotter now than you would see in August and September. That's kind of scary to think about it, but that is definitely true. And you've seen, for people who are watching the models, you're seeing a lot of dynamics in the models, and that just means that the conditions are ripe, and maybe it also shows us what the pattern might be this year, which they said that was going to be the case. A potentially big-time Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico season. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to invite my friend Josh Morgerman, the top hurricane chaser in the world. You know him as iCyclone. He's a man wears a bunch of different hats, and we'll remind you what those hats are in just a second. He also built a house in Bay St. Louis as a result of his time here during the pandemic. He fell in love with the area, built a house here. He still has a place in L.A. Where his business Symblaze is going strong. He has a marketing and branding company, but he lives here as well. And there's so many stories, a lot to catch up. But before we go any further, let me welcome Josh Morgerman back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Josh?
Yeah, real good, Ricky. Awesome to be back. It feels like it's been a while. I feel like we haven't really had a quality conversation in a long time.
Yeah, it's we're way overdue. Hey, listen, whole lot to talk about. For people who are watching this on Facebook or YouTube or on SuperTalk TV, they can see that your background is different than it was before. Before when you were here, you were in the least maybe Hurricane House 2.1 or 1.0. And then, of course, every now and then you would join us from L.A. But now I see your new home behind you. You just had a really incredibly popular housewarming party where storm chasers from literally around the world came to your house, which will probably now be an annual event, including Jim Cantore, James Reynolds, and others. It's incredible. You have pulling power, my friend.
Yeah. No, I was actually surprised. Yeah. So yeah, this is the finished Hurricane House. In Bay St. Louis, came out good. I'm actually, I'd never sort of worked to design and build a house before, and I'm actually surprised how well it came out. I don't have any regrets when I walk around the house with the layout and everything else. It came out pretty much the way I wanted it to. This is a fortified gold house, which means that it's extremely wind resistant, which is something I went for. Of course, with hurricanes, you have to worry about water and wind, but at least in terms of wind, it's in a good situation. And yeah, I did have a big. It was sort of, I called it a hurricane season kickoff party. Sort of Saturday before last, and I had a lot of people, between probably 140, 150, and it was storm chasers, it was friends, it was neighbors, it was some celebrities, some media personalities, state and local officials. It was really it was a motley crew, and it was fun, and we were all just kind of celebrating. I want to be really clear, and I said this in my little speech, not celebrating hurricanes. This was not a pagan ritual to summon a hurricane from the Gulf. It was to celebrate awareness and preparedness. I want to be really clear on that.
Well, listen, because Jim Cantore has covered tropical systems for so many years, and of course, he was here during Hurricane Katrina and was nearly washed away. I mean, it's an amazing story. But because of that, because so many people, especially in the Gulf and up the East Coast regions, they know that when Jim Cantore shows up in town, it's not a good thing usually. And so I saw my former company, NOLA.com at the Times-Picayune, had a little blurb about him being in town and told people, don't worry, he's here for the housewarming, not because there's some tropical development that's taking place. But when you get Jim, he's super famous because of his wonderful coverage of tropical events over so many years. But when you can attract Jim, I mean, you've seen him in tough situations before, haven't you?
Yeah. Jim and I we're old friends. We run into each other in the field or sometimes at conferences. So this was the first time we actually really socialized. I invited him to my party. He actually flew in for it. He loved Bay St. Louis, by the way. He saw what I saw. He sort of caught the Bay St. Louis bug. But yeah, it did create a stir. He was seen in town, and like you said, apparently the folks at NOLA.com, they got so many letters and inquiries from folks in Louisiana and Mississippi being like, okay, why is he here? And not everyone is like you or me, where they're total weather nerd looking at the models 24/7. A lot of people don't pay attention day to day, so they thought maybe something was coming. And actually, NOLA.com had to have an article saying, "Hey, he's just relaxed. He's just in town for a social event." It was pretty funny.
Well, over the years, it was when I was at the Sun Herald. I had did more than one interview with him on the Weather Channel, and because he did a lot of follow-ups after Hurricane Katrina here, and then when the tornado went through Tuscaloosa. I was publisher of the Press Register and president of Alabama Media Group at the time, and I went to Tuscaloosa. In fact, the president of our Birmingham operation actually helped with the recovery effort, much in the same way I worked here after Hurricane Katrina, and I did an interview with him there. But I've touched him in many iterations of his world. But can you imagine the number of people he's interviewed over the course of his career? Lord have mercy.
Oh yeah, I mean he's been going a long time. I mean, I remember, when I was just sort of like a young weather nerd before I was, like a working man, and he was on that channel, and it's been I think well over 30 years. I mean, it's been a while. He's been really going, and he's really, he is, he's not just an on-camera Met. He's like he's a real weather nerd. Like, he's really one of us, as I like to say, and you kind of sense that he has that kind of, that deep passion. And he is good about doing follow-up stories, for example, with Katrina, not just kind of leaving the area after the big headlines, but kind of, looking at the recovery. And of course, the story of coastal Mississippi's recovery after Katrina, it's a 2-decade story. I mean, it's still happening,
Yes.
and right now I'd say it's in like a full-on renaissance phase. I mean, I think, when I drive along the coast from Bay St. Louis to, Biloxi, I'm not leaving out the rest. It's just the part that I inhabit. it just feels like a boom town to me. There's building, there's stuff being created. It's like it always has this, since I've been living in Mississippi, this area has had this kind of very upbeat feel of like people coming in and creating stuff and building stuff, and not in a bad way, in a good way. And I think it's one of the things that attracted me to the area. It just really feels like it's on the up and up.
Well, you're now actually part of the Renaissance story, because the way you fell in love with the area. My son's in a real estate business, and he's a lawyer, real estate lawyer, and they do a lot of closings for people outside the area who are moving into the area. But in your case, and we'll get back on the other side and talk a little bit more about this, but this kind of historically accurate architecture that made this part of their house, and you've got a pro weather station there. I bet and again, we'll talk about this on the other side. I bet your friends from these storm chasers from around the world, I bet they did some oohing and ahhing when they were at your house. But we'll continue our conversation with Josh Morgerman on the other side. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Josh Morgerman. He's the top hurricane chaser in the world. If there were a Guinness Book of World Records, he would hold that. I wouldn't want to hold that, but I mean, he would hold that award as being numero uno, being in the number of eyes and eye walls, literally from around the world. So coming back to this housewarming party and this wonderful home that you built, that's architecturally, I say it's not architecturally unique. It's indigenous architecture, indigenous to Bay St. Louis. You fit in. You're part of the Renaissance of bringing back this beautiful architecture that makes living there so cool. When you're at your house, you get out on your porch and you do the walk to the beach and you go downtown, does it occur to you actually pulled it off? I mean, you had this dream, I'm going to do it. Then you found the lot, and the house is built now, this gold fortified home that you have some great partners. We'll talk about them here in just a second. But does it amaze you? You actually pulled it off?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, because it just sort of sunk in the other day. My favorite time of year here is right now, the summer, and I'm a weirdo. I love the heat and humidity. Especially at night, I love the way it feels sitting on the porch. I don't even have fans on the front porch because I just like the way that air feels. I don't even need to move it around. But I was, I was sitting out on that porch and I was just thinking that, kind of like, I feel like I'm really just, like I'm exactly where I want to be, in this this nice house in this beautiful town and at this time of year. And it felt like, finally, after all this work or a couple of years of planning and doing, all the pieces have clicked into place, and now I'm enjoying it. And I'm glad you mentioned the architecture, because that was really important to me. My initial plan, as you know, because you and Ann were, partners in the process, you were following along as I was looking. I originally wanted to, I love the historical architecture around here, and my original plan was to find an old house, restore it, and do that. And I couldn't find something that I could do that was suitable or that I could afford. So in the end, I just decided to, just build from scratch. But then it was important to me. I wanted to really celebrate the kind of the local architecture. I didn't want to bring something new. I actually wanted to celebrate what this place is. I mean, I moved here because I like it as it is, I'm not trying to change anything. So it was a matter of, okay, how can I create something that celebrates what are the kind of architectural styles here, and I think I've gotten a lot of compliments from old timers in town, folks who have grown up here. So that makes me feel really good. I think that's like, there's no better sort of stamp of approval than people in their 60s and 70s who grew up here. So I think it came out. I'm happy with how it came out.
Hey, listen, we'll talk about this. So for people who have not heard us before, your company, Symblaze, is very successful branding and marketing company. And then, at a very young age, you fell in love with this whole notion of storms, and you became a storm chaser as a hobby initially, but then it evolved into this business, this really significant business that has lots of different pieces to it. And we'll let you share what those pieces are, but it provides for you an opportunity to gain a lot of sponsors. Your storm chasing is a commercial venture for you. So, for example, when I talked about the weather station that you have there, that's a sponsor. but it is one that we'll be able to actually tap into and follow. If a storm is coming, we'll be able to do wind measurements there and other measurements. You have a camera there as well. It's at a certain height that's required. I mean, you've done it right. You even had one of your sponsors actually helped you with this party that you put on. So it's a business venture for you, and that's important to recognize.
Yeah, it is, and it's and that's important to me. Regarding the weather station, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was, this is sort of like nerd heaven for me. So I built the house, and then the other important thing was to establish a weather station, but not just any weather station. A mesonet grade or research grade weather station, meaning these data are the readings that this station collects are going to be ones that government agencies can use because it's properly done. So I had a friend of mine, a consultant who establishes, he designs and builds mesonet weather stations for universities around the country. I actually had him come in and design the solution. So there's a mast on my back lawn that's 33 feet high or 10 meters. And the reason is because that's actually the correct height for measuring wind speed. You should do it that high off the ground. So my friend, his name is James Hyde. He came and designed the solution. It's made almost entirely with Campbell Scientific parts. That's what we went with. Campbell Scientific is the top brand if you want to do really, really serious research grade sort of measurement of the weather. And they are a sponsor, but I'm not using their parts because they're a sponsor. What happened was James designed the solution. Then I said, okay, wow, this is going to be a little expensive for me. So let me reach out to them and have a talk. And so now we're in kind of a relationship where, I'm kind of like out there talking about it, but I'm very excited about this. And I want to say, folks in the Bay or just on the coast, next time a hurricane is coming, you will be able to go to my website, and you'll just the data will be there for you to look at in real time anytime you want. So if you're in Bay St. Louis and a hurricane's coming, you can go on my page and you can know the exact wind speed in the Bay at that moment on a research grade instrument where it's absolutely correct. Now that might sound really nerdy and kind of like whatever, but I guarantee a lot of you folks who aren't even weather nerds, when there's a hurricane coming, you're going to want to know, and the wind is really ripping, you're going to want to know how strong it is, and now you're going to know.
But actually, this is actually a really big deal. And let's look at any hurricane in the past 5 or 6, 7 years that has hit the Gulf of Mexico. What you'll see is you'll get reports during the storm, and some wind speeds won't be they won't seem high based on what the category of the storm is and all. The problem is having reliable weather observation data that we just don't have a lot of those sites around. So they had to find something nearby. Some of it could be more anecdotal. It could be someone actually reporting on the ground. Again, it's not at the right height, and you don't know for sure if you can rely on it. We should probably have a lot more of these around so we can get more reliable data just in general because of this being sort of a tropical area. But that's a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, like the United States, we're one of the best. I mean, we've got a relatively high density of good official weather stations, but even we don't have enough. You can't have too many. So now my station is another one in the mix. There's actually another good NOAA station right in Bay St. Louis, actually at the Yacht Club, at the Bay Waveland Yacht Club, couple miles from my house. So now we've got two really good, solid, properly calibrated stations with the anemometer, the thing that measures wind at the correct height and all that stuff. So I think that hurricanes hitting Mississippi, at least we'll have a couple of really good data points from Bay St. Louis. Obviously, we've got Keesler Air Force Base. We've got, the Gulfport Biloxi Airport. I mean, we've got a few, but, you can never have too many stations. So I'm excited to kind of add to the network as, for us to understand. And as I always say, Bay St. Louis, ground zero for some of the biggest hurricanes in American history, not just Katrina, but Camille. I mean, this town was inside the eye of Camille when it came ashore with winds of 175 miles an hour. A repeat of that event would obviously create some incredibly interesting data on my station, I'm sure.
Hey, listen, if my memory serves me correct, when we rebuilt the Ship Island Lighthouse, I'm almost positive we used hardy plank on the side of it because of its wind resistant capabilities. You actually have a partnership with them as well, don't you?
Oh, yeah. When I first designed my house, as you know, I'm really into history, and I wanted my house to look like an old house. And I said, okay, we're doing wood siding. And my builder, Bo Ladner, he was like, we're not. Nope, not in Mississippi. He was just like this. It is so tough on wood down here. Just the moisture, the rot, the termites. I mean, whoa, the termites here like out of control. So he steered me in the direction of James Hardie, of Hardie Siding, because it's actually fiber cement, but it looks like wood. So the historical commission's totally cool with it because it looks like wood from the street. But yeah, this stuff, fiber cement, and it's another product where I'm an absolute true believer. I rest easy at night because I feel like my house is encased in this coat of armor. And a lot of folks on the coast build with it. And actually, my party was sponsored by James Hardie because it was sort of we're revealing the house, this new fortified gold house, and showing off what makes it hurricane ready. And one of those things is the Hardie siding. So I was excited to show that off. I'm a true believer in this product. I mean, anything that resists moisture, rot, termites, and fire, and is impact resistant, that's siding for Mississippians.
So one of the people who came to your party, for weather nerds, the name well. He's one of the most popular storm chasers in the world, was James Reynolds. He came over from Japan. So you can attract him, my friend.
Yeah, James and I are really, I call him, he's like my bestie in the weather world. So James is like me, he's a hurricane chaser. He specializes more in the Western Pacific, where they're called typhoons, but it's the exact same thing. Typhoons and hurricanes are the exact same thing. And James and I, in terms of the number of sort of penetrations, as we call them, like getting inside a storm, James and I are the world number 1 and 2. So in some sense, we're rivals. We've known each other a long time. We were really close. Then we had a period of distance, and then we're sort of like got our friendship back on track, and now we're tight.
Well, we'll come back on the other side. We'll talk about how significant his commitment is when we get back on the other side. But we'll continue our conversation with the top hurricane chaser in the world, who lives now part of the time in coastal Mississippi, Josh Morgerman. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have Josh Morgerman with us, the top hurricane chaser in the world. And when we talk about hurricane chasing, that is a really specific thing. These guys, like we were just talking about, I don't want to short circuit how significant a partnership chase might be between someone like James Reynolds and Josh Morgerman. And you can expand on that. And I want you to add to this as well. What I notice in some of the weather blogs, the tropical weather blogs especially, what you see is a growing number of young people who want to be chasers, who are chasing, and they'll say, "Are you going to go chase this storm?" "Yeah, I'm going to go chase this storm. We're going to all go chase the storm." Everybody wants to be a chaser. That's a dangerous thing to do, just to go decide to do, isn't it? So, I mean, you and James have seen a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, and I'm really constantly torn about how to talk with young people because, when there's some like young person on Twitter who's like enthusiastically tweeting to me and like wanting to learn about all this, I see myself in them. I remember being like, 17 years old, being this like serious weather nerd. And I want to encourage it. But then another side of me is, gosh, I don't want to encourage them to do something where they're going to get hurt because it is a dangerous sport. There's no safe way to chase hurricanes. There are degrees of risk. But if you're a storm chaser, especially if you're the global kind like me or like James Reynolds, where you're literally going to every hemisphere, you're going to, all kinds of countries, including developing nations that don't have great infrastructure, it is risky business, and I mean, James is lucky he's still in one piece. I'm lucky I'm still in one piece. It's a tough sport. And so I'm very conflicted in terms of how I kind of try to encourage young people. I try to make safety a core message, but I don't always set a great example in that sense. I feel like I talk the talk, but then I don't always walk the walk. So that's been a little bit of something I'm wrestling with, I would say, a little bit.
So how competitive is it in your world? Like, how competitive? You mentioned your relationship with James Reynolds. How competitive is that?
I would say storm chasers, I would say it's generally a very competitive scene. It is, I've said this before, some people get offended by it, but I'm always a straight shooter about this. I look at it as a competitive sport, I absolutely do. I totally see it that way. I treat it that way in terms of staying fit, staying focused, mentally and physically on what I do. I'm a very competitive person. I don't know if that's how I was born or if that's because my dad pushed me so hard in sports. My dad was really tough on me, but I'm very competitive, and that at a certain point in my life was a problem because it got in the way of friendships. I was so competitive, I couldn't shut it off. And that's something, as I've matured a little bit, I've learned how to do it. And my friendship with James Reynolds, I think, is a good example of that he is one of my very best and dearest friends, and he's a competitor. And I've somehow managed to it was a growing process for me, but to learn how to see a competitor as a friend and to be happy about his victories, like when he scores something big, that I didn't score, to just feel genuinely happy about that. So James and I, we've been through like life and death situations together. We had a period of distance. We're last 5 years or so, we've really been, back on track. And it's, as the top two guys in the world in terms of this, we realized we needed each other because there's something about that, when we're deep in season and kind of flying all over the world, hunting down storms one after the other, it's hard in a lot of ways, and it's hard in ways that other people who don't do that don't understand. So it's almost like we needed each other just for kind of like, mental therapy.
Yeah. Josh, has been so many close calls for you because of what you do, the risks that you're willing to take. I think about ending up in your car in a hurricane that came over Orange Beach area. I think about Typhoon Haiyan, and you turn from chaser to rescuer. Patricia, and I mean that place where you were for Hurricane Patricia in Mexico should have collapsed. There's really no good reason it didn't. And Hurricane Dorian and then the Bahamas. You found your way to a cinder block schoolhouse, but the reality is you're lucky you did because nothing else made it in that area. I even think about last year, that small hurricane in in Mexico, where if it had not been for a sturdy bar, what would have happened? I mean, you find yourself in these incredible positions, and you get lucky. I know a lot of that's experience and knowing what to look for to be the safest you can be, et cetera. But it's still scary, and there are huge risks that you guys are taking.
100%. And I wrestle with this a lot because the most meaningful chases that I've been on, and I've been on a lot of chases. I mean, I've been inside the cores of 70 hurricanes, and I've gone on more chases because not all of them were successful, and what I've noticed is that the events that are most meaningful, the events that you look back at with a sense of wonder, the events that people want to hear about at conferences, the events that people want to make TV shows about, those are the ones where you were scared out of your mind, and the situation felt completely out of control, and you felt like you made a fatal mistake. So the problem with that kind of thing is there's sort of it's a messed up reward system where you realize that, okay, the really meaningful chases happen when I take risks and when I'm walking right on the edge of that cliff. And I don't know that that's a healthy thing. But I'm at peace with it in the sense of, this is a life I chose. There's a certain amount of risk. I mean, I always tell my business partner that I don't want to sound dark, but if I die in a hurricane, just, in the eulogy, just say he got what he deserved.
Oh man, what a thing to have to be able to say if that were to happen. But I know you. I know that to be true. That it's a pursuit. It's just a pursuit. It's something that you're just willing to do. It's sort of like I think about my former mentor, Roland Weeks, was an acrobatic pilot. He had a lot of close calls in his biplane, doing that. And if he often said that if he died doing that, he didn't, thank God, but if he did, he would die doing something he loved to do, and he's willing to take the risk to do it. I think, there are a lot of maybe parallel scenarios like that, but you love it. I mean, it's not just a hobby, it's a pursuit, and now it's a living, and it's an exciting part of your life. It's necessary in your world, isn't it?
It is. And it's almost like it almost goes beyond a passion or a love. It's almost like it almost has an addiction side to it and I think that a lot of the really hardcore storm chasers, the ones who do it, who just were kind of born to do it. It's like it's a very innate need. It's like it just drives you. There are times when I'm not in the mood to chase, but it's like it's like an addiction. It's like you can't help it, and that's a very strong driver. And I think that artists have that kind of thing. I think some athletes have it. I think like extreme sports people have it. It's something that drives you to do something that looks very uncomfortable and unpleasant to other people, and sometimes you don't even want to do it, but you can't help it.
Hey, look, the same year my family went to the Dominican Republic on a vacation. You also chased a storm there, but you think about this season with all the prognostications, the way that the high should settle in and steer storms into the Caribbean and get into the Western. Anything that gets into Western Caribbean usually is headed to the Gulf of Mexico, but you're probably going to be spending some time down in the Caribbean this year. You may be spending, you had a year where I think you did 2 scenarios where you rode the storm out on the Yucatan Peninsula, and then you also rode the storm out on the U.S. mainland. You may have that opportunity more than once again this year. Has all that occurred to you as you think about this season?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the forecast for this season. Like, whoa. I mean, what's really interesting is that, and you've seen this, every agency, every university, they all come out with their seasonal forecasts, and they're all saying the same thing, just like record-breaking numbers, because of all these different factors. It's not just, I mean, the sea surface temperatures are crazy warm. We're having, temperatures now that we normally see at peak season. But then it's the other things. And like you said, it looks like the position of the ridging in the Atlantic is going to steer stuff further west, meaning into North America, instead of curving out to sea. All indications are we're going to be busy, and we're going to be busy in the Gulf. And, I chase all around the world. And in a typical season, I'll go to East Asia a lot, because our hurricane season overlaps with their typhoon season. But I'm thinking this year, it looks like it's going to be a very United States, Mexico, Caribbean centric kind of season. I think that it just looks like we're going to be busy with threats, and particularly might be the Gulf of Mexico. Hate to say it, especially now I got skin in the game, but I think I think this could be. I think it's going to be very interesting November 30th at the end of the season to look back at these next 5 months.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate that. But it is what it is. And what that means, actually, because the models are getting so much better, that means that the model runs are going to just keep us busy, even if the storms don't, just because the situation, the setups are such that the models are sniffing out a lot of different stuff. When we get back on the other side, we'll talk a little bit about that, but then we shift gears and find out what else is going on in Josh's life as it relates to reality TV shows, hurricane experts for networks, and so on and so on and so on. We'll see about that in the last segment when we continue our conversation with Josh Morgerman. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have Josh Morgerman with us. You can look him up on just the iCyclone on social media, and you can find him. He's the top hurricane chaser in the world. And he's had reality TV shows, and he's been hurricane experts, and he's kind of the man. Hey, before we get to the latest on that part of your world, real quick, just as it relates to models and the National Hurricane Center, and they're constantly adjusting surge forecasts and directional forecasts, et cetera. They've all gotten better. The models are getting better. The National Hurricane Season has gotten better. It's probably one of the reasons why all these the predictions of a very active hurricane season are more concerning, because the models are pretty good now, aren't they?
Absolutely. They really are. I mean, they're still not perfect, but we're getting a better and better understanding of what's going to happen. I would say the area where they really blow my mind more and more is with forecasting track. Once we have a hurricane, the models have gotten so good at telling us where it's going to go. They're still having issues with the other big thing, which is understanding whether the storm's going to be strengthening or weakening. You have situations where they expect a hurricane to become a major, but it just never comes together. Or you have the opposite, where the models are showing a disturbance not really developing, and then it becomes a Category 5 in 18 hours, which is what happened down in the Pacific off the coast of Mexico. A Category 5 hurricane hit Acapulco, and the models did not show that coming. So the intensity forecasting still a challenge, but the models showing track have gotten better and better.
And Michael here, on the Florida Panhandle. My goodness, I mean, what a devastating story that was, and how fast it ramped up as well. Hey, so you got any reality TV shows in the works? What's the latest with Weather Nation? What's going on in your world?
So once again, with Weather Nation for the season, I kind of work seasonally with them. So I'm on a 6-month contract as a field correspondent and kind of hurricane dude. Love working with them because, as I always say, they're a TV network that gives me they let me be me. They don't try to turn me into a reporter. They treat me as a chaser. So they let me kind of decide where I go and everything and how I tell the story. And they give me a lot of editorial freedom to sort of propose different kinds of content. So I get to be creative on that channel. So I really enjoy that. As always, I'm always like any guy in TV. I'm always like, hustling that next project. I'm talking with Trusted Media Brands, which made season 1 of Mission Hurricane, my last series. We're talking about a possible season 2. I've got one of the things sort of factors there is what kind of goods I come up with this year, because every chase is a story. So it's like, I kind of need more stories. The last season was 13 episodes. So that's a lot of content. But it looks like this season might be given a lot of grist for that mill.
Yeah, it could be a season in and of itself. Let's hope that's not the case.
Right.
Because if it is the case, it means there's a lot of people who are suffering.
Exactly.
That's the sad reality of hurricanes. But what's interesting is you go into these communities, what you're finding, if you were to go back and say the entirety of your hurricane chasing, what you're finding when you revisit communities that have rebuilt, that the whole conversation around resiliency is actually playing out. They're building back stronger. They're building back higher, better. They get that they need as a community, especially in hurricane zones, to be able to bounce back quickly. I mean, the fortifying you did at the home that you're in today, and your neighbors did that. Some of them did that as well. We did it here at my house in Biloxi, but you're seeing that more, aren't you?
100%. And I would say that that's like an important message that I want to give to everyone, which is that you absolutely can build for hurricanes, and you could build a home to resist hurricanes. When I chase in Japan in the islands around Okinawa, okay, you could be in a really intense typhoon, like a Category 4, and you come outside afterward and you'll see very little damage to buildings. You might see like a broken window or a crooked sign, or the cars get thrown all over the place because they have those little tiny, those lightweight cars over there. But the buildings do really well because they know how to build over there for typhoons, and they do it. And we can do it too. And I think more and more we are. I think like with the fortified gold process, I think with using like hardy siding, there's things you can do to make your house hurricane ready. And I'll tell you, in places in the United States where they built for hurricanes, you'll see it. I was in Naples, Florida for Hurricane Irma, direct hit by Category 3. I could not find after that storm any structural damage in the town, like zero, because they'd implemented proper codes. And I think in Mississippi, I think we're doing a really good job here too. I think that, I know with Bay St. Louis, like the code compliance, they take it very seriously. And I think that the stuff that's coming back is good. And I think we're going to have better results the next hurricane that comes by.
Hey, yeah, Josh, for a matter of fact, you think about Hurricane Zeta here in coastal Mississippi was a more than hardy hurricane. And the way we bounce back from that is pretty amazing. It just shows that we have built resiliency into this place. And I can't say, you don't say it's a good test because it was real, but still we learned that we're resilient, didn't we?
Absolutely. And a quick thing I'll say about Zeta, because I know you're about to wrap up, but Zeta in a lot of ways surprised everyone, including me. Did not expect it to be so spicy when it got to Mississippi, but it gave a lot of people an opportunity to upgrade their roofs.
Well, Josh Morgerman, top hurricane chaser in the world. It's great to catch up with you, my friend. Stay safe now. Stay safe. We'll stay in touch with you. Look forward to visiting with you soon.
Thanks, Ricky.
You bet. Hey, listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.